back again and I'm working on another project that's actually kind of a continuation of the last video that I posted. Now in the last video I was making an editorial design for a coffee table book, which you can see up here. Now while I was working on this project, I had a friend mention to me doing something with editorial illustrations and collage. Now for whatever reason, it's never actually crossed my mind to combine those two, making collages for editorial illustrations, but it's actually a really good idea. Even better yet, I've actually seen examples of this out in the wild, so I know there's somebody out there doing collage illustrations for, articles and magazines. So if there's somebody out there already doing it, I figured I could do it too. So I figured this would be a good portfolio piece to kind of work on. So here's what I'm gonna do for this project. I'm going to go to the Wired website. I'm going to find 4 articles from their 4 different sections that don't use any kind of collage illustrations and then build out illustrations for those articles. So I'll go and I'll find an article for their business section, their culture section, their political section, and their science section. I'll make sure to leave some links to the articles down below, so that way you can check those out and I can give credit to the people who actually wrote the articles. But once I have the articles selected and I've gone and I've read through them, we'll be able to start. So let's get to it. All right, so this first design is going to be for an article titled "Microplastics Could Be Making the Weather Worse." And as you might assume from the title, really this entire article is just talking about how there's microplastics that are being put into the air and they could be making some of the weather in the world worse. And while I was thinking of a way to illustrate this idea or this concept, I thought, what if I took a cloud shape and then I put a bunch of plastic bottles or something like that into the cloud to kind of illustrate that. I tried this out with a photo from an actual cloud. I didn't really like the way that it came out because it didn't really read like a cloud. So what I decided was to go into Illustrator and make my own vector cloud. So that way it might read more like a cloud rather than just kind of some random blob. It took me a little bit of time to create a shape that I liked that really looked like a cloud because I want to make it as obvious as possible, especially since we're not going to have all the shading and stuff. So it really needs to be a cloud. Once I had a shape I was comfortable with, I could bring it back into Photoshop and then I could start kind of adding some stuff in. And since it's about the weather and not just about the clouds, I wanted to add just a few raindrops just to continue to illustrate that it's about the weather. And I also thought it might kind of help balance out the collage and the illustration. Now I did have an idea of taking maybe some kind of like recycling bin, almost like it's dumping out recycling into the cloud. But the more that I played around with that idea, I realized that I just didn't really like it. I think it felt a little bit too tongue-in-cheek or too playful. I'm not necessarily trying to be like super serious with this, but I feel like the tone that idea created was a little bit too far from what I was going for. So I just scrapped that and then continued on with the idea that I had. One of the changes that I wanted to make was the photo that's inside of the cloud. I didn't really like how tiny all the plastic looked. So I wanted to find something that was a little bit bigger, and I also thought it might be a good idea to maybe have some of the trash kind of coming outside of the cloud, just to kind of mess with that shape a little bit. So that way it's a little bit more interesting and maybe you can kind of make out some of the shapes a little bit more. Now once I had all of that finished and I felt like it was in a pretty good spot, one of the things I also wanted to add was a big recycling symbol. I felt like the symbol would not only help reiterate what I was already talking about, but would also kind of be a symbol that people could latch onto. So if they were kind of scrolling through the website or whatever and they happen to see this image, they could see that symbol and recognize it. And since it's familiar, they might take a second to try to understand what the image is and what it's trying to say. And I also just thought it would be a good element to add in to kind of help bring all of the elements together into one thing. And then the last thing that I did was just add some texturing and some patterns. I felt like the water droplets were just a little bit too bare. And so what I did is I used some of the envelope patterns that I have, or envelope textures that I have, and then I added those onto it, which I think, again, kind of goes along with the kind of recycling or trash kind of idea or concept that I'm working with. And then my last bright idea was to use some of these scribbles that I have to kind of make it look like it's the rain that's coming from the clouds. It's a small detail, but I was really happy with that. But that was pretty much it for this design. Now, the second article that I was working with is called Confessions of a Hinge Power User. But long story short, the article is about a man and basically his experiences over a decade of using different dating apps. And so the very first idea that I had was to take a cutout of a guy and then put a bunch of likes into that shape to kind of showcase it's like kind of like this overwhelming presence from this person. Honestly, I wasn't really sure about the idea, but I wanted to see it through, and I thought maybe once I got to the end, I might have some other ideas. But honestly, I got to the end and then I was like, you know what? I hate this. So I decided that I was just going to scrap what I had and then just start over again. Now for my second attempt, I wanted to try to use a different perspective. So I asked ChatGPT to write me a summarization of the article. And what ChatGPT said was that it's basically a connection of all these different ideas and experiences that this guy is having. And so I thought connections would kind of be a good visual that I could work with. So my idea was to take a guy who's on his cell phone and then have all these different experiences that are surrounding him, and they're all pointing back to him as well as each other. It's almost like creating this web of experiences or ideas that are surrounding this guy and his experiences using dating apps. Now, I spent quite a bit of time refining this, and I felt a lot better about this one than I did the first one, but I still wasn't really happy with the end result. Really, just whenever looking at it, I thought, I could do better than this. And so I wanted to try a third idea to see if I could come up with something better. And luckily, the third idea was definitely the best for this article. Unfortunately, I was already struggling enough with this article, and so I didn't really want to have the pressure of recording my screen as I made it, so I don't have a recording of exactly how I made it. So I'll talk you through the results as well as kind of how I got to the end result that I got to. So for my third attempt, I thought, forget trying to be literal or conceptual. Let's just try to paint a very broad picture of what this article is about. So I took the photo of a man holding a phone. I cut out the phone, and behind it is some flowers. So I thought, that kind of goes with the kind of love aspect. And then even behind that is a picture of a man and a woman kissing. Honestly, I'm happy with how it came out, even if the design doesn't have a unique or smart concept that makes it go, oh, I get what this article is about. I think it just looks good, and it still is on point and on theme for what the article is talking about. And I think more importantly, I think it's eye-catching enough to where I think if somebody was scrolling through, they might see this and go, oh, what's this about? And that's the most important part, which is grabbing someone's attention and making them want to read the article. Now, the third article that I decided to work with is titled, "Two Upstart Search Engines Are Teaming Up to Take on Google." And the first idea that popped into my head was two boxing gloves kind of like punching at each other, and then just having a bunch of the Google colors kind of exploding from the center of those two boxing gloves punching each other. Really simple concept, and there's really not a whole lot to talk about. So really most of my time on this illustration was really just focusing on trying to make it look like there's some kind of momentum going with the gloves, as well as with the kind of other scraps of paper look like they're flying off. Like I said, I really want to make it look like it has like that impact and that momentum. But of course, since it's dealing with Google, I thought it would be smart to use the Google colors just to kind of tie in everything together. But yeah, this was pretty much a one and done. I just came up with the idea, I executed it, and surprisingly, it turned out exactly how I thought it would. And overall, I'm really happy with that. Now, the last article that I'm making an illustration for is called, "Did Elon Musk Win the Election for Trump?" That's right, we're getting political. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and make a disclaimer that I'm not gonna talk about my political views in this video. So this illustration is me just making an illustration for this article. It has nothing to do with what I think or feel about any of the people or any of the ideas that are expressed in the article or through this illustration. So funny enough, I've actually seen a lot of political collages. I actually follow a couple of artists on Instagram who do political collages. So funny enough, I'm actually the most familiar with editorial collages through political collages. So I already had some ideas and feelings that I thought I might be able to incorporate into this design to make it really cool. So first off, I wanted to include the two people that the article is talking about, which is Elon and Trump. I found some photos that I thought were okay. There's some specifics when it comes to like copywriting and government figures. So I might have been able to use some different photographs, but I chose to be really safe with it and only use photographs that I could use that had a Creative Commons license. But surprisingly, it ended up working out, and I think the composition that I ended up with worked really well with the pictures that I had. But once I had my two characters from the article, I wanted to start adding in something that would kind of intrigue people or kind of bring some concepts that are in the article into the illustration. And so I was thinking like, oh, well, what about a presidential seal or some money or something that looks like a ballot, stuff like that, that kind of paints a very broad picture of what the article could be like. Or, if you already saw the title, you could look at the illustration and go, oh, okay, I understand what the idea is, the concept here. Now, as I started to work on this collage, I wasn't really happy with where I was going. And so I was like, let me take a quick break and then come back and I'll work on it some more. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll probably already know what I'm going to say. I did not record the next part of my design. So let me show you where I ended up and I'll talk you through my idea process. So overall, I was sticking to the same theme and aesthetic that I was going for in the original. I just took a lot more time to kind of build out the composition in a way that I thought I liked a lot more. I wanted to keep it simple with only a few shapes and a few colors, so that way I could really illustrate and paint a picture of what the article is about. And like I said, I wanted to use things that were either mentioned in the article or might be kind of talked about. So things like the ballot, money, America, the presidential seal, stuff like that, that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. And then funny enough, I wanted to add some kind of human aspect to the look of the poster. And so I thought maybe I'll add one of the kind of sketches or doodles that I have. And whenever I placed it, it kind of landed close to where Trump is writing. And I was like, wait a second, that'd be kind of fun. So I brought it down so it kind of looks like that is what he wrote, which I also think it goes well with the composition. So one of those kind of funny things that made me laugh, but actually worked really well. And so I just kept it in there. But with that, that's all the articles and illustrations that I was going to make. Honestly, I was really happy with how these turned out. They were a lot of fun to work on. And since I haven't done a lot of collage stuff recently, it was a lot of fun to kind of get back to, I guess, my roots or something that I just haven't done in a long time. And it felt like a really great way to use the skills that I've learned over the past couple years working with some digital collages. Honestly, I'm really sad that it took me so long to figure out that there was a great connection between Collage and Editorial. I'm like, oh, I could have been doing this already. Like I could have already had a portfolio of these kinds of designs. I just never made that connection. But with that being said, I do have some other stuff that I want to show off in this video that I made for this project specifically. I had a friend mention to me something called spot illustrations, which are basically just illustrations that go along with the main image that kind of help support and tell the rest of the story through the article. So I decided to come up with a couple rough layouts just so I could showcase what these illustrations and these spot illustrations would look like if they were in an actual magazine. So for the first article, the one about the microplastics, I thought it would be really cool to have an image of, some people looking up at the sky or something like that. And instead of seeing clouds, you see trash. I found these images of some plastic bags underwater, so they actually work really well to look like they're floating in the sky. And then I added some plastic bottles that kind of go along with them, just so if you weren't quite sure what you were looking at, that would kind of clue you in onto what you are looking at. And then for the second article, since it's talking about dating apps and phones, so I thought it would be fun to make a collage that's inside of a cell phone. Just a fun idea I had, and I thought it would work really well for this article. And then for the third article, it talks a little bit about creating this network of search engines and websites and that kind of stuff. And so I thought, what if I kind of made almost like this connection of ideas and web searches and that kind of stuff that all kind of combine into one thing. It's a really simple design, but it still goes along great with the main image for the article. Now for the last article, it's not really much of an article as much as it is a conversation. And so I couldn't really come up with a good way to make a layout design for this article specifically. So I decided not to make a spot illustration for this one. But with that, that is all of the illustrations that I made for this project. And I just want to be clear, the layouts that I made are not something that I spent a whole lot of time on. They're just rough, just to kind of give you an idea. If I was actually going to make any kind of layout design for these, I would definitely spend a lot more time on them. So let me know what you guys thought about these illustrations. Did I do good? Did I do bad? Is there some that you liked more than others? Let me know in the comments. And of course, if you found this video helpful or entertaining in any way, I'd appreciate it if you would check out the rest of my channel and then consider subscribing. Hope to see you in the next video.